Hello, everyone. This is Triby Chiavello with Primo Magazine, and today's date is July 27th. July 27th. Primo Magazine for and about Italian Americans, and I'm going to bring to you today news from an Italian American perspective, and this is the news roundup of the last week that's passed. I'm coming to you today from Washington, D.C. And when I begin the program, I just want to give you some news a little bit about, I'm a journalist, so I just want to always give you the news wherever I'm at. And the news here in Washington, D.C., District of Columbia, it's the home of the U.S. Capitol. It's the home of the president. It's the home of our government and things. But I just want to give you what it's like to live here a little bit, just teeny tiny news update. The big news here, if you live here, is that they've changed the bus routes. That's what they've done. They've decided to go ahead and change our buses. So that's kind of that's throwing everybody off a little bit. I should say a little bit. That's throwing everybody off a lot because a month ago you would take the bus, and it might take you from Glover Park, a neighborhood here in Washington D.C., would take you to DuPont Circle. Now it's going to take you to all different kind of places, and there's new numbers and things, so it's very confusing. But this is what happens. They change things. You know what I'm saying? The metro system here in D.C., they decided to change the bus routes that we've had for many, many years, and it's just created havoc. So that's what it's like when you live here. Most everyone just looks at Washington, D.C. as the home of the government. That's where the news is. But there's also about 600,000 people that live here, call it their homes, and this is the situation that we find ourselves in sometimes. But that's Washington, D.C., of course. It's been warm here, very hot, of course, for the summertime. It's nice to be here in July because everybody leaves for vacation. So if you stay behind, you get to have the whole streets to yourself. So you don't have to take the bus. You can take the car instead. You don't have as much traffic. But anyway, big news this last week for Italian Americans. The big news was the passing of some very famous people. Very sad, of course, when anybody who passes a celebrity, particularly if you're a fan of them or if you just knew them for many, many years. You have Hulk Hogan, you had Chuck Mangione, and then you had Ozzy Osbourne. And of course, he's not Italian, but I'll talk to you a little bit about him and his situation regarding his Italian connections. This comes right after Connie Francis. Connie Francis passes, a huge singer, huge star of her time, and then we have these people that pass. It's very, very, it can get very sad for a lot of people who are particular fans, like celebrities, like television, the movies, the whole media arts that we have. First up is Hulk Hogan. He was Italian. He was Italian on his father's side of the family. He was born Terry Jean Balia on August 11th, 1953 in Augusta, Georgia. And he died on July 24th, 2025 here in Florida. And he grew up in Florida. His father was in the construction business. And he wanted to be a baseball player. He was a pitcher in the Little Leagues. He's a pretty good baseball player for that mark. And he also played an instrument. He was a bass player. But he was a huge guy. He was a huge kid. He ended up becoming 6'7", that size, that bulk. So he decided to do whatever that usually anyone does who's that big. You lift weights, work out, become an athlete. That's what he did. That's what he did. He became an athlete, and he just got into the wrestling. In the 70s, he decides to become a wrestler. And, he has to go to the local circuit first. He's got to make his name there. He's working out. And he was winning competitions. He had charisma. He looked good, a big man, nice tan that he had, big biceps. And it was when he was in Memphis, Tennessee. He's there at a local interview. And next to him is Lou Ferrigno. Lou Ferrigno, he played the Incredible Hulk in the late 70s. And Terry's manager is watching him, sitting next to Lou Ferrigno, and Hulk Hogan towers over this guy next to him. And so his manager says, he's watching it on the monitor, says, Hogan is the real Hulk. Terry Bollea is the real Hulk. So that's how they got the name Hulk. And he went under different names. It was like Hollywood Hulk, they called him Mr. Hulk, whatever it was. But eventually that name stuck. He still was going under his Italian name until he joined the World Wrestling Federation. And Vince McMahon, who was the owner of the organization, president of the organization, as you know, he wanted to change his name. He wanted to give him an Irish name. So he gave him Hogan. And that's how he became Hulk Hogan. And originally they wanted to dye his hair red, but they kept it blonde. He was going bald pretty much when he started wrestling. So he had his hair down that way like this, and he had the famous handlebar mustache. He had a lot of charisma, a lot of energy, very personable. So they felt that they could build the World Wrestling Foundation around him. However, they had a run-in because I think it was 1982, he starred a brief portrayal in Rocky III, and he played a wrestler in the beginning. He goes up against Rocky, who's played by Sylvester Stallone, and it's a fun episode. But Vince McMahon didn't want him to do that, so I think he was dismissed from the World Wrestling Federation for a short period of time. But then he came back, and then you have 1984 onward, he becomes a huge star. WrestleMania becomes the biggest thing ever. I mean, everybody watched it in the 80s. And his first, he started out as a villain, and now he's going to be the hero, and he defeats the Iron Sheik in 1984. And, he's the Hulk Hogan, Hulkamania, Hulksters, and he's got a whole group of kids now following him. And then 1985, he teams up with Mr. T. And Cyndi Lauper was involved for a little bit also. They had these big press conferences and these big meetings and things, these spectacles before the main bout. It was going to be there in Madison Square Garden. And he's going to go up against, he and Mr. T are going to go up against Rowdy Roddy Piper and Paul Orndorff, Mr. Wonderful. And these big men are there, and they're gonna fight it out. And you had it was a huge spectacle. It was incredible. You had Billy Martin he was going to make the announcement as to who was the ring, and he was going to do the ring announcement. And then you had Liberace. He just showed up in the middle of the ring and did like a dance with the girls, and then he was going to do the honorary belt. And so we had Muhammad Ali there. He was going to be one of the refs apparently. And it was just wild, it was just a wild situation. As you know, wrestling, much of it is choreographed. You could say it's fake, but the movements, the jumping and the wrestling holds it to do, that's very real. But an incredible spectacle, huge event. Everybody watched it. And then he went up against, a couple years later, he went up against Andre the Giant. This is what they did. They always put him, Hulk Hogan, against some other figure. And Andre the Giant, it's just incredible to just look back on it. And here is Hogan. He's about 6'7". He weighs like 320 pounds. And he's tiny compared to Andre the Giant, who weighs like 520 pounds. He's like 7'4" or something like that. It was incredible. And Hulk Hogan in the wrestling match was able to pick this guy up and slam him. It was just fun to watch. And then he went up against Randy the Macho Man Savage, who also was Italian, by the way. A lot of Italians involved in the Wrestling Federation. But, it's sad, Hulk Hogan passes, just this incredible figure from the 80s, a very eventful life. Not only was he involved in wrestling, he had his huge fan following. He ran into a couple of problems legally. One was with Marvel Comics because he had the Hulk title, but they actually owned the trademark. So they worked out a deal where, because at one point in time he was more popular as Hulk Hogan than the Incredible Hulk. So they worked something out where all the merchandising that was that Hulk Hogan made, Marvel would get a piece of the action. Would get like 1% of all the money that they made, and they couldn't call Hulk Hogan the Incredible Hulk Hogan because that meant that was borrowing too much from Marvel. So that's how they just, it was always Hulk Hogan. That was it. There was not the Incredible Hulk or anything like that. They couldn't use anything related to the comic book characters. They couldn't make them green. They couldn't do anything like that. He often wore a bandana. Sometimes he'd wear sunglasses, quite the spectacle. And he had some other legal issues. One was steroids. The prosecutors, I think it was the federal government actually, that had a case against Vince McMahon about steroids. They had made the case that he was dealing steroids to the wrestlers. And so, Hulk Hogan was called on the stand to testify, and he admitted he used steroids. He used steroids, but he also, in his testimony, showed that McMahon wasn't involved in any dealership or anything nefarious like that. And so they found Vince McMahon innocent. But he was also, Jesse Ventura was another wrestler. And Jesse Ventura, as you well know, he became governor of Minnesota and other things. And he wanted to unionize the wrestlers. He wanted to have something similar to what Major League Baseball had. And he had approached Hulk Hogan about this. And Hulk Hogan told Vince McMahon. He warned Vince McMahon that this was underway. And so McMahon was able to work against it. And Jesse Ventura never forgave Hulk Hogan for that. There was the famous Belzer lawsuit. Richard Belzer was a comedian, and he's interviewing Hulk Hogan and Mr. T, and he's kind of pushing Hulk Hogan. Yeah, show me the wrestling moves. It's all fake. It's all fake, isn't it? So sure enough, Hulk Hogan put him in a hold, and Belzer fainted because of it, and he fell down, hit his head. So he sued. Richard Belzer, the comedian, sued the World Wrestling Federation and sued Hulk Hogan. I think they settled out of court for like $500,000 or something like that. There were some other things that happened along the way also. There was a famous sex tape. Hulk Hogan was the disc jockey. His wife, I think, had an affair with Hulk Hogan. They filmed it. And then they had it on Gawker magazine, and he sued the magazine for invasion of privacy, and he won. It was like $100 million lawsuit, and apparently it was when the verdict was read, Hulk Hogan actually cried in the trial because he felt that his privacy had been invaded so much. So, these are the things that happened in his life. Is just this man had a very eventful life. He did run into health problems, though. All that jumping and things you see going on in wrestling affected his spine. And so he had to have a lot of surgeries done. He had difficulty walking. He was often in pain in his last years. But his big success in recent years, he there at the National Convention for the Republicans. Trump is going to run for president again, and he comes out and he endorses Trump with his typical bravado and energy. And his trademark was he ripped his shirt all the time, and he rips his shirt, and there's a MAGA T-shirt underneath, and that's how that really kicked it off for the convention, kicked it off for the campaign. So Hulk Hogan, a man from the '80s, he kept on going strong. We're going to miss him. We're going to miss his spectacle and his entertainment that he provided us over the years. Another death that was happening, when this was announced on July 24th that Hulk Hogan had passed away, also Chuck Mangione. It was announced that Chuck Mangione had passed away. He had passed away a couple days earlier, I think. And, Chuck Mangione, famous jazz musician, he played he didn't play the trumpet. I always thought he played the trumpet, but he played the flugelhorn, which is a smaller version of the trumpet. And he played that, since he was a kid in Rochester, New York. Both parents were Sicilians. They ran a grocery store there, the Mangione grocery store. And along with his brother, Gaspare, they called him Gap, they could play piano, they could play brass instruments. They took lessons very early. And by the time he was born in 1940, November 29th, 1940, by the time he was in his teens, he can play almost masterfully these instruments. He did go and get a Bachelor of Arts in Music from the Eastman School of Music, and then he just started playing with jazz bands, jazz ensembles until he came into his own. And he could write music and he could play it wonderfully. And he had a couple of big hits in the mid '70s with the fusion jazz. He was able to take rock and R&B, I guess, that tempo, and kind of fuse it together with traditional jazz and come up with something special. His biggest hit was "Feel So Good," and it's very recognizable when you hear it. And then around 1980, he had another song, which was actually my favorite, which "Give It All You Got," was the song, I think, the title of it. And it was there in the 1980 Olympics, the Winter Olympics. The American hockey team wins the Miracle on Ice. They defeated the Russians. These are kids, and they're defeating these people who are really professionals. And he performs this piece live, and they just take that music and just connected it to the whole experience that we shared in watching the American hockey team defeat the Russians. And I believe the last team they defeated was Finland to get the gold medal. And it was just it was a very upbeat tempo song that he put together. And, it was that kind of music that you would listen to when they showed highlights from sports, and you'll know it when you hear it, basically. So that's kind of what he was about. He pretty much stayed in Rochester. He became famous in his genre of music because, he looked kind of like a hippie, right? He had this kind of long, straggly hair, a growth on his face, and he wore that fedora hat. Nice smile, nice persona. So he was able to kind of capture the people of his generation who were going to venture into jazz and other things. But he kind of stayed mostly in Rochester, his hometown. He kept active in the Eastman School of Music. He began the jazz ensemble there, and then he began a set of classes on jazz music. And they gave him, that's where he got his Bachelor of Arts degree, but they gave him an honorary doctorate. So in some interviews, he would tell people, "Call me Dr. Chuck." That's what he would say. But, anytime you see an interview with me, you can tell he's a very down-to-earth guy, very friendly, very nice, excellent talent. And he was very proud of his Italian heritage. He would, he did a number of benefit concerts, one of which was for the victims of the L'Aquila earthquake some years back in Italy. And so, this is the kind of guy he was. Sad to see him go, but his music lives on. That's the beauty about it when you're in music or in Hulk Hogan says television, whatever it is. Your legacy lives on, and that's something to consider. The third biggest news that we had, I think probably top the other two actually, was the death of Ozzy Osbourne, the famous rock singer. What can you say about him? He was born in England on December 3rd, 1948, and then he died on July 22nd. Now, his Italian connection is interesting, and I'm going to get to that in a few seconds. Let me just say this about him. He had three phases in his career real quick. One was when he was with Black Sabbath. He was a rock singer there, a famous rock band throughout the 70s. And then he was kicked out of Black Sabbath, which remains strange a little bit because it's a four-ensemble band. You had Ozzy Osbourne, you had Tony Iommi, you had Geezer Butler, and you had Bill Ward. So you think he must be a partner in the band and the ensemble. So how could he be kicked out? But apparently that's the way it was. They had a contract where they just had to have a vote, 3-4, I guess, and he was out. And so he went on his own, and he came up with an album called Blizzard of Oz. Now in 1980, that was huge. That was kind of an underground thing. My friends and I got into this album. We were like one of the first people to play it in my friend's basement. And it was just wild. We had a picture of him in the front, holding this huge crucifix. And that just kind of made him in the 80s on his own. And then later on, with his wife, Sharon Osbourne, she was very good at management. He became a reality star. And that's kind of elevated him as well. But he got his start in England, and he went to the same school that Tony Iommi went to. Now, Tony Iommi was the guitarist, and he really was the central figure of the band. And at first, Tony Iommi was playing guitar. His mother was Sicilian, and his father was from Le Marche, and they had a store there in England. I want to say it's Birmingham, I guess, but I'm not sure exactly the town or the city they were from. But he went to school with Ozzy. Ozzy was like a year younger than him, and he took up the guitar at an early age, Iommi, and he was quite good, excellent, and he really saw himself pursuing a career in guitar. But he worked at a factory. So I believe he's 17 years old. At the time, I think he was going to play for Jethro Tull at one point in time. He was that good. And he was working at a factory. The last day he was going to work there at this metal factory, because he's not going to work there anymore. He's going to go pursue his music. He got into an accident, and he cut off the top of his middle finger and of his ring finger. Now, he didn't play this way. He played this way. He played with his left hand. He was left-handed. So it was those fingers that got affected. And so he couldn't play guitar anymore. They have him wrapped in a hospital, and he's just, beside himself. He's thinking, I'm not going to play music anymore, so I'm going to have to go back and find something else to do. And he's very sad about it. Well, the foreman of the factory, I guess he stopped by the house or something like that, and he brought with him a record. I only had a reputation for music. He knew music very well, of course. And he said, I want you to hear this music, this old jazz guitarist. His name is Django Reinhardt. Django Reinhardt. He was from, I think he was a gypsy at one point. He started out from Romania, and he was kind of a gypsy who in Belgium, but he picked up the jazz music in the 20s and 30s. And, he's playing this record. Of course, it's old jazz. And, he asked Iommi, how do you like his music? Do you think he's a good guitarist? And, he does, the last thing he wants to do is listen to music. He's just very ambivalent about it all. He says, yeah, I guess he's good. And this man tells him he's playing with two fingers. Django Reinhardt, he's only playing with two fingers because he suffered a burn. So he can only play with just a couple of fingers. So if he can play with two fingers, you should be able to play without two fingers. You should be able to play with the rest of your hand. And that inspired him that inspired Tony Iommi to get back on the guitar, and he did. He got back on the guitar, and what he did is he formed thimbles for his fingers, and that's how he played. And he solderized it, he fixed them so they would fit over his hand, fit over his fingers. And what he did was he used different strings for the guitar. He used banjo strings, and he tuned it in a way so that the strings would be easier to press, bend. And that kind of gave him that heavy metal sound that he was looking for. And he teamed up with Ozzy Osbourne and Geezer Butler and Bill Ward, and they named their rock band Earth. It was typical of those days, I guess, psychedelic, a lot of colors, free love, that kind of thing. And they really weren't getting ahead as much as they thought. They were a very good band. They practiced a lot. And there was another band called Earth that was having some success. So now they're being confused for this other band. Well, where they were rehearsing was a movie theater. And the movie theater was making a film from 1963. And the original title of that film starred Boris Karloff. And the original title of that film was E tre volte della paura, and it means the three faces of fear. But they didn't think it would sell very well outside of Italy. That's where the movie was made. So they called it Black Sabbath. And that's what Ozzy and Tony and Geezer Butler and Bill Ward saw, and that big great name for a band. And that's what they decided to do. They decided to take what was the hippie, freedom-loving concept and turn it to like a horror vibe. And this is how they had that band. This is where they found great success. And that movie was made by Mario Bava. Black Sabbath, and it starred Boris Karloff. Boris Karloff as the narrator, and he starred in one of the. It was three stories in one, and that's kind of what they did. And I go into detail about that movie, Black Sabbath, and a bunch of others in this book right here. This is a book, Italian Horror Cinema, the most influential horror films from Italy. It's a wonderful book. I enjoyed writing it because I love the movies and I love horror movies. And what's fascinating about it is how Italy had affected the American market, and they did that because at the time Italy was like the third biggest producer of films. You had the United States number one, then England was number two, and Italy was number three. And throughout the era of Mussolini, they couldn't make movies. They couldn't make horror movies, I should say. And so after Mussolini died, after World War II, in the 50s, they began to venture out in different genres, and horror was one of them. So I think the first horror film that Italy saw over a 30 or 40 year time frame was in 1956 or 1957. And then Mario Bava was involved with that from the beginning. Mario Bava was an incredible director, probably one of the best, if not the best, from Italy. He was a technical expert, and he ventured into new genres, and horror was one of them. What Italy had to do in the horror genre was they didn't have the money, the resources, or the reach of America and England. What they had to do when you're in third place, what you always have to do, is come up with something new or unique to get you noticed, to get the fans, to get the feedback. And this is what they did. They came up with new storylines. They came up with new technical aspects of it, the film, special effects, you name it. And this is kind of what they did to get their names, to get their movies out there. And that had a tremendous influence on the American movies. And it's all right here in this book. You can read about it. And I'll have a link to where you can order this wonderful book that I wrote. I had a lot of fun writing it, and I think a lot of interesting information. And if you like the movies and you like horror movies, you're going to love this book. So that was it for Ozzy Osbourne. Tony Iommi and the group got together, and they ended up, like I said, firing Ozzy. It was 1979. And they then hired Ronnie James Dio to sing this place. A lot of people thought that they had fired Ozzy because of drugs, because of drug usage and alcohol. But that really wasn't the case. They wanted to take the band in a new direction. They saw what the future was going to be in heavy metal. And this is ironic because they saw Judas Priest, other bands. They saw the punk movement happening. They wanted somebody to fit that genre. And if you know anything about Ronnie James Dio, he has an incredible voice. But what's ironic is that when Ozzy left Black Sabbath, he pursued a new way of music, a new way of heavy metal, and that really defined the genre for many years. So that's kind of what happened. But sad loss for Ozzy Osbourne. What can you say about him? And about the band that existed there, Tony Iommi and everybody there with Black Sabbath. Interesting talent, interesting way they reached the heights of rock music. And everybody's looking at that, these deaths that occurred. And AI, artificial intelligence, paid a tribute to the figures. They had them all shown there in a photograph or an illustration, if you will. You had, Hulk Hogan, you had Ozzy Osbourne, and I'm going to show it to you here. And you had, Chuck Mangione. They had Malcolm Jamal Warner. He passed away also. He was on the Cosby Show. And then sure enough, you have a lady on the side there. She looks like Betty Crocker, for goodness sake. And that's Connie Francis. That's how AI looks at Connie Francis. So, if you see that, it's you probably are going to wonder who she is. But that's supposed to be Connie Francis. So that's what's going on around social media. But this week, we had some big stories coming up, of course. As you know, Primo magazine, I endorsed with a big mayor's race in New York City. I endorsed Curtis Sliwa. And it's coming up in the polling. Last polls show Zorhan Mamdani Mamdani ahead still, and Andrew Cuomo is in the race as well. CBS has Mamdani at 26%, Cuomo at 23%, and Sliwa at 22%. And so it's becoming a tighter race. But what happened was with Mamdani is because we showed a photograph of him giving the finger to the Columbus Monument in Astoria, Queens, that caught a lot of flack for him. And so the Italian American community, like I've predicted, that the first thing that he's going to do when he gets elected is tear down one of the 3 or 4 main statues we have in New York City. He's going to either tear the statue down in Queens, I think that probably is going to do that, or Brooklyn, and I think he's going to leave the big statue alone at Columbus Circle, but who knows what he's going to do. I think there might be another statue in the Bronx. There's one in Central Park that he might also look at. So that's the first thing he's going to do. He's going to do some other things too regarding our Italian American heritage. So the Italian Americans must come out and stop Mamdani. Well, one group, the Italian American Civil Rights League, they protested him in front of his office there in Queens. As you know, he represents Queens in the state legislature. Well, sure enough, a group decided to have a counter protest of the Italian Americans protesting Mamdani, and this is Italians for Zorhan. That's what they call themselves, and they had sent out a press release, and this is back on July 21st. They showed up to have a counter protest of the Italian Americans protesting. The Italian Americans who were protesting Mamdani are far more in number than the Italians for Zorhan. Now, the Italians for Zorhan, according to this press release I'm reading right now, they had teamed up with the Irish for Zorhan. So you got the Irish and the Italians. If they get the Israelis, it's going to be the 3 eyes for Zorhan. But this is what they did, and they said that the protest they're going to have, co-endorsed by the Irish for Zorhan, reflects a generational shift in Italian American political identity away from the legacy of Columbus and Cuomo. So they linked up the Cuomo to Columbus, and they said a statement from some of the members: Italian culture is not defined by colonial figures. So Columbus is a colonial figure. This is what's going on, by the way. All the left has just embraced, they really see colonialism. The last colonies were were dismissed back in the 60s, I guess. But they think that's the problem with the world is the after effects of this colonialism. And they say, Italian culture is not defined by colonial figures or political machines. Our pride comes from struggle, solidarity, and the belief that New York should work for everyone, not just the powerful. We reject the effort to weaponize our heritage against a candidate who has consistently fought for renters, workers, and the most vulnerable. And so they go on to say they endorse Zorhan. Now, this is interesting about it. If this group, or any group out there that's going to vote for Mamdani, if they're really serious about the after effects of colonialism, then they should embrace Columbus. And I'll tell you why. Who was the biggest colonizer in the world? It wasn't Italy, that's for sure. Italy almost had no colonies. So the best they could do was under Mussolini. They were able to take a little bit of Egypt and Libya. They got their heads handed to them in Eritrea and Ethiopia. That didn't turn out well at all. But meanwhile, England had colonies all over the place. Half of Africa belonged to England. India, where Mamdani's mother and father is from, that was all controlled by England. Other places in the Middle East, elsewhere, were under the flags of the United Kingdom. The famous, the sun never sets in the world in the flag of the United Kingdom. It was all over the place. And so if you're upset about about colonization, you should be upset with the British. And who the British didn't like? The British didn't like Columbus. From the time of Queen Elizabeth, they were maligning and spreading terrible rumors about Christopher Columbus. The reason for that was Britain's rival for empire at that time was Spain, eventually become France. So they wanted to knock down the person who explored, the first explorer of the New World for Spain, and that was Christopher Columbus. So they thought the more they could malign the top figure of Spanish exploration and the Spanish imperial society, then that would allow some of the people who were already under the domain of Spain would break away and join with Great Britain. Well, the Americans, we were colonized. We were colonists under Britain. We embraced Columbus because the British hated him. So if the British hates them, we're going to take him on. And we like Columbus because he broke away from the old world. He broke away from the old world colonizers. You know, he broke away from those people by sailing out of Europe and elsewhere. And this is why we embrace them. If you go today and you visit many of the sites in Washington, D.C., you will see a number of tributes paid to Christopher Columbus and his discoveries. Washington, D.C., as you know, District of Columbia is named after Columbus. And that's because we embraced his symbol. We embraced his figure, not as a colonizer, but somebody who broke away from colonization. So if the Italians for Zorhan and others take your anger out on the British, take your anger out on the French, they had the two biggest empires in the world at the time, and embrace somebody like Columbus who rebelled against all that old world tyranny that you're now saying he represents. So, that's just something that we have to deal with on a constant basis out there. There's just the academia has put in the minds of people a Marxist idea that it's just, the way the world is today is affected by things that happened 100 years ago or more than that, and that's the problem. And so, we're looking at history in a very narrow sense. And this is something that we have to deal with. And this applies to Columbus. This applies to what we're all about. One of the key figures in defending us and defending Columbus Day and Columbus monuments is Basil Russo. He's the president of the Conference of Presidents of major Italian American organizations. And he was at the Villa Forenza here in Washington, D.C. last week. And Mariangela Sapia is the Italy's ambassador to the United States. And there she invited the Italian foreign minister, Antonio Tajani, to speak with people, speak with Americans there in the audience. And he didn't bring up the changes in the Italian dual citizenship law. Back in March, Italy changed the way you can have dual citizenship. Prior, you could go back to your great-grandparents and claim citizenship that way. Now they're just going to say you can only claim your parents or grandparents. And this has been something that, Basil Russo and a lot of other people have been at the forefront of complaining about the change in law and to try to bring it back to what it was. And he sent out a press release stating that he met with the foreign minister, Italian foreign minister, Antonio Tajani. He didn't mention anything about Italian dual citizenship in his speech. So Judge Russo met with him and talked with him and expressed to him, the collective disappointment by the Italian American community at the change in the law. And they did this in Italy because of a backlog of applications for dual citizenship from Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, these places, Venezuela, and elsewhere. And so they took it on. So they basically changed the law. So the United States Americans are affected, adversely affected, and this isn't right. It's bizarre that they changed the law to begin with, to be honest with you, because everywhere you read is about how the population in Italy is shrinking because the birth rate is so low. Well, if that's the case, I would think you'd want to bring more people in, particularly people who have roots and strong connections to Italy. But apparently that's not what they want to do. So he spoke to them about that, and apparently what he said was, his sense was, that Tajani really didn't know that the Americans were as adversely affected by it, which seems bizarre, but that's kind of what the sense of it was. So, you need people like Judge Russo and others who can, talk to power, engage, and try to bring up some sort of resolution. But as you as an Italian American, you need to speak up about this. You need to speak up about how Italy passed this law affecting you and affecting how you relate to your homeland. Your parents, your grandparents were there before the Italian foreign minister became head of the government, and so you have a right to look into that. The law is kind of strange for me personally. I think the way it was, for instance, my grandfather was born 20 years. My grandfather died, I should say, 20 years before I was born. Okay, and he came from Italy. He came from the Salerno province. So my understanding of it was that my father, he's the youngest in his family. So when my father was born in 1921 and 1922, by that time my grandfather had already become an American citizen. So therefore, I am not able to get dual citizenship. And I think my father, well, I guess my father could have been dual citizenship because he could then look at his grandfather to see that situation there. Maybe in the old law, maybe I could have pursued to see what my great grandfather's legal status was, to see if I could become a dual citizen. But because the law has changed, I don't have that opportunity any longer. So that's just one example of so many different examples that are out there for people who wanted to become a dual citizen, who wanted to make that connection back to Italy. But they changed the law, unfortunately, and we have to try and change it back. And that's what it's all about. And, Tajani, the Italian foreign minister, he made the news a couple of days back with a interview he had with a member of the press. And he stated that Italy's view of the current Palestine-Israeli crisis that's there, and their viewpoint of it. As you know, in the last video I had, the Israelis bombed a church in Gaza, and it injured the parish priest who was an Italian there. And so he spoke up about that. But this is what he said. He said that Italy would recognize Palestine as a state if Palestine did two things. So the Palestinians did two things. One, if they eliminated Hamas, and two, if the Palestinians recognize Israel. So this is big news because Italy is standing up and basically saying that, there is a two-state solution, willing to recognize Palestine if they do these two things there. So, Italy is increasingly becoming a leader in Europe, and that's why Time magazine had on their cover the current Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni. And this was a cover feature, and this came out July 23rd. And it's an article by Massimo Calabresi, and it covers Giorgia Meloni, and it says where Giorgia Meloni is leading Europe. So they see her as a key leader, and it makes a lot of sense because she's a pretty woman, she's attractive, she's very personable, and she was liked by President Biden, and she's liked by President Trump. And she has been at the forefront, and she inherited this from Silvio Berlusconi, really, of following along with the Americans, giving the Americans their lead in Europe. And she's been doing that. She was elected as a conservative, but her rhetoric tends to be more nationalistic. And yet she's a pro-supporter of the EU and of NATO and NATO support of Ukraine. Well, she is an important figure, and it's great that Time magazine put her on the cover. But before Time magazine, we had her on the cover. Primo had her on the cover, and we had her on the cover because she rebelled against the COVID-19, the pandemic precautions that were in place. She was the only one in Italy who stood up for the people who didn't want to have to go through all these stringent rules that were put in place. And because of that, she was given the mantle of leadership. But more than that, think about that. She's the first woman to lead national Italy. Italy, as you know, was a disparate group of communes, city-states, communities for much of her history after the fall of the Roman Empire. And then they consolidated in the Risorgimento. For years, this was the dream, to have Italy as one country. Machiavelli, Dante, everybody wanted this to be the case. And you finally have that, and now you have a woman leading it. That's pretty extraordinary. Rome never had an empress leading the Roman Empire. Never had a figure to lead the country like her. So we put her on the cover for that before Time Magazine, several years before Time Magazine. And I think we have some copies available if you want to pick up that copy. It's a very good edition of Primo. But you can see how important it is when you have the media that specializes in the Italian American community, Italian American media like Primo. We tend to see things a little bit ahead of what some of the other people see. We may not have the resources to go ahead and, like Time Magazine does, but we may have the insight that's ahead of the curve because we're so involved in it. That's why it's important, I think, to be a part of, to receive the Italian American media in your home as subscribers and advertisers and elsewhere. So, here she is right here on the cover, and before Time Magazine. So that tells you something right there. But the big news with Italy over the last week or so was Donald Trump, his president. And he announced that the United States is going to take the United States out of UNESCO. UNESCO, that's the United Nations Education, Scientific, Cultural Organization. And it's got these World Heritage Sites all over the place. It's got like 1,000 designations of World Heritage Sites. So Trump took us out of UNESCO. This is the third time the United States has withdrawn from UNESCO. I think there's like 170 countries that signed on to the 1972 convention that began this group within the United Nations. And the United States is one of the original signatories, as well as Italy. But when Reagan was president, he took us out of UNESCO. And then Trump, in his first term, took us out of UNESCO. And now in his second term, he's taking us out also. And the complaint is that the UNESCO is biased, it's mismanaged, a lot of woke type situation happening. They're going out there, they're going beyond what the original mission was, which was to find heritage sites and designate them as UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Well, when you look at Italy and UNESCO, you see a very tight connection there. Italy is number one in the number of World Heritage Sites under UNESCO. Italy has 61 World Heritage Sites. China is number two with 60. Germany is third with 55. France has 54. And India has 44. Now, the United States has 26 UNESCO heritage sites. And it's not just man-made structures, landmarks, ruins, that kind of thing. But it's also natural sites. For instance, here in the United States, I think we have Yellowstone Park is considered a UNESCO site. The Statue of Liberty is considered a UNESCO site. But Italy has a bunch of them. And when you look at Italy and you look at the number of UNESCO sites, some of the highlights are the first one to be listed from Italy as a heritage site was the rock drawings of Acamonica, which is in the Lombardia region. It's drawings that were done during the time of prehistoric man. Venice and the Lagoon, that's considered a World Heritage Site. All of Vatican City is considered a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Just think about that. The whole country, really, is considered a site worthy of cultural predominance. You also have Pompeii. You have Central Florence, Central Rome, where the Colosseum is, in the Roman Forum. In Florence, you have the Duomo, that area. The Tower of Pisa is considered a UN heritage site. The Dolomites is considered a natural part of the heritage. And Mount Etna in Sicily is given UNESCO designation. Mount Etna, the volcano, is given designation, but Mount Vesuvius is not. But I guess since they covered Pompeii with that. Cinque Terre, of course, is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. When you leave Italy, there's a number of heritage sites too because of the Roman ruins, the archaeological sites that were there from ancient Rome. So you have the Bath houses in England. You have Tarragona in Spain, Palmyra in Syria. That's a UN heritage site, and that's a Roman produced area. The Roman ruins of Baalbek in Lebanon. That's also a UN heritage site. So Italy really dominates much of the heritage. The United States contributes money. Everybody contributes money if you belong to the UNESCO. But UNESCO, they have a budget of about $750 million a year, and they don't give any of that money out. If you have a World Heritage Site, you don't get any money from UNESCO. What you get is just a designation, really. You have to come up with an agreement with UNESCO organization that you're not going to zone it, you're not going to develop anywhere near the heritage site, you're going to maintain it. You can do everything that they want you to do, but they don't give you anything. If you want, they can send out experts and other people, learned people, to go ahead and check out the area. There's a problem or something like that you run into regarding the preservation of the heritage. But the benefit of it is, you ask yourself, what's the benefit of this? Well, if you call yourself a UNESCO heritage site, that allows you to leverage that and try to get donations from outside organizations, NGOs, preservation organizations that will maybe contribute money. That apparently helps. But UNESCO is headquartered in Paris, and it's got like 2,000 or so staff members, and much of that money just goes for that. Just goes for the staff, the rental of the facility, the big building that they have there, and other things. Italy has a trust that they developed over the years, and it's the Fondo Ambiente Italiano. It's the National Trust for the Preservation of these archaeological sites and historical sites in Italy. And I think that they contribute about $500 million a year to the various Italian sites there to upkeep it. You have Europa Nostra, which is also contributes money to Italy. And then you have the World Monuments Fund. And then you have some organizations like, for instance, in Venice, you have Save Venice, and they contribute. It's made up of a group of people here in the United States, actually. And they contribute like $1 million or $2 million to help preserve parts of Venice and some of the landmarks there. But that's really what you get from UNESCO. You don't get any money. You just get the prestige of the designation. And so since that time, according to what Trump has argued, they have lost their mission. So now they're trying to, they have educational forums, seminars, they have material they can send out to schools and things. And he's complaining about that they're trying to go woke, go, cultural correctness. And I guess the main thing, though, about it is that they, according to Trump, it's anti-Israel bias. And this is the reason why Reagan also got out of UNESCO. Israel used to belong to UNESCO also, but they too have dropped out. And they allowed the Palestinian Authority to join UNESCO. And so they've gone so far as to look at the areas of Jerusalem, and they're not calling them Israeli sites or Jewish sites, they're calling them Palestinian sites. And apparently some of these sites are actually, when you go back to the ancient times, these are where Jewish people lived and such. And so this is also becoming part of the controversy. But, if the United States withdraws, you're looking at UNESCO is going to lose about 10% of their funding. I don't think it's going to have much of an impact. But again, it doesn't go to any place. It doesn't go to the upkeep of these sites and things. Anytime I get a reporter or a freelance writer from Italy and they write for me, and they write about something, for instance, Matera is considered a UN, UNESCO World Heritage Sites. They always mention that. They always mention that this is a World Heritage Site or it's a pending World Heritage Site. So it's a big thing, really outside the United States more than any place, I think, to have that UNESCO designation. We really aren't too much involved with that. I really don't see too many people talking about that here in the United States as much as I see people talking about that from Italy and elsewhere overseas. Well, Italy, you got UNESCO, you got archaeological ruins. You really have a place for the old, right? This is where we go back and we look at ancient Rome and the Renaissance and the Middle Ages and all these incredible periods in the past. And so Italy may suffer the stereotype or the stigma of being a place that's from the past. You don't go there to see the future. You go there to see the past. Well, that could be more wrong than you can imagine. Italy is a very high-tech, modern industrial center. The first technical college was put in place in Italy, in Turin, Italy. That's where the first technical college was located. We had MIT, before we had all these places. Italy was number one, and that has continued the situation ever since then. And I bring that up because artificial intelligence, right? You log onto your computer, you can utilize artificial intelligence. The next step of it is going to be androids, robots. I mean, when you look at Star Wars and you see R2-D2 and see 3PO, and you see these other robots from the science fiction era, well, that's happening now. They're producing robots and they're doing things. And you have 5 countries that are in the forefront of this, one of which is Italy. Italy is at the forefront of robotics. For many years, Italy was producing robots. These were more cumbersome type machines for mass production facilities, for factories and that sort of thing. And a lot of them coming out of Naples, for instance. And this is what was being used. Well, they have taken that technology one step further, and by integrating artificial intelligence, they've come up with a very promising robot. His name is Robee the Robot, and that's what they introduced last week at one of the trade shows. This is a robot produced by Oversonic Robotics in Bassano, in Brianza, Italy. And the owner, the chairperson of the company is Paolo Denti, and Fabio Puglia is the president. There was a big staff of engineers that came together to produce this robot. This is we call him a robot, but they call him an autonomous navigation humanoid. And this is what they look at him as. And he's got 39 degrees of freedom, which means he can just maneuver on his own, from his own intelligence, cognitive abilities, his cognitive AI abilities to do tasks. They are looking at him to really work in factories and warehouses where it might be too dangerous or there's some danger to the people, and that's what he's there to do. Now, this is a robot. He can pick up almost anything, and now he can pick it up and place it. This is what he can do. So it's quite extraordinary what he's able to. He can pick and place operations are incredible, apparently. He can understand voice commands. He can even engage with you. I'm assuming that if there's a package someplace that's damaged, he can report it. I would imagine that. He's got like an 8-hour battery life. But he doesn't have his legs. He's got everything like we do, a human body: shoulders, biceps, whole. It's all machinery, metal, wires, the whole 9 yards. But his legs, his feet, basically, are going to be wheels. So he's got everything what humans would have, except for his bottom part. It's going to be a group of wheels that can have him maneuver around and stuff. So it's quite the fascinating creation. You have several robots out there nowadays. First and foremost on the list is Boston Dynamics. America is still the leader of robotics, and that's Atlas is the robot that they use, and he can almost do anything, I think. At one point in time, Japan was really at the forefront. You had Asimo, and that was done by the Honda company. But it cost a lot to make, and he was pretty amazing how he was able to do things. But Honda no longer has that robot in production. So then you have, besides Italy, you have South Korea and China. Now, South Korea had a Hubo is the name that they use, and he's mostly done in transportation. And then Walker is the Chinese robot, and he's mostly there at hotels, that kind of thing. He greets people, and apparently he can even sit and drink a cup of tea with you. He doesn't drink tea, of course, but he can at least keep you company. But Robee the Robot, he's going to be the, I'm calling him Robee. It's spelled R-O-B-E-E, so it might be Robee. But he is going to be mostly in industrial capacity. So if you have a factory or if you have a warehouse, and you're looking to try and gain greater efficiency, you may want to consider purchasing the latest edition of the robot. It's going to cost you about $150,000 to purchase him. He's going to be about 6.5 feet tall, and you can do, apparently you can do almost anything that anybody else can do, but probably without the problems that you may run into. Again, they're looking at to market him in places where it might be more dangerous for people to work in those areas. This is what they say, of course, but you figure somebody like Amazon or somebody like that, they have, I'm sure the robot can work probably efficiently, fast, and you don't have to worry about any of the, the personnel problems you might run into. So I wouldn't be surprised if he purchased a robot. If he's going to buy an army of these things, 30 or 40 of them, I'm sure he'll get a discount from the company. But, quite amazing. It's just another indication of where we're heading to in society. And it's just great that Italy is at the forefront of this because, you have everything is Baroque, Middle Ages, ancient Rome for the most part, right? And all these cities are old cities pretty much. But behind the scenes are high-tech innovations and a lot of serious modern industrial undertakings taking place. So it's quite exciting. We'll keep an eye on this. We'll keep an eye on everything, to be honest with you. I'm just fascinated by it all. I love Italy, and I love our Italian American community. And I love coming to talk to you as well about Primo Magazine, about what we're doing. And, again, go and purchase Primo, subscribe to it, and you can advertise in it. Let us know. We have great our advertisers do fantastic in the magazine, by the way. But we have other things we can offer too, online, websites. Probably going to have here also maybe promotions, advertisements as well. So let us know. But you can pick up the magazine here, and you can also pick up our book, Italian Horror Cinema. If you love the movies, and you love horror, and you love Italy, this is a great book to receive. And I'll have a link for all these things and everything that I've talked about. So there it is, the Italian American News Roundup. And the date is, July 27th. This is the week that happened past. Some sad losses, but we have some also some incredible new beginnings taking place. This always makes everything very exciting. So I thank you for tuning in today, and I look forward to speaking with you again next week. Until then, God bless, and take care of yourselves, and all the best to you.